Good day, and thanks for joining me on Tech Tips, Fixes, and More. In a way, today's video is part of the more, but it's also less. Although it deals with technology and there are some tips involved, today's video isn't so much about the end goal of fixing something as it is about the processes we use in getting to that goal. That's because sometimes the goal isn't what we think it will be. I've talked about this a bit in other videos, where we weren't able to provide a concrete solution, but we had to go through a process to come to that conclusion. This one was like that. I received a road box that had equipment in it, but I wasn't told what the equipment was. In fact, the customer wasn't sure what the equipment was himself. He just told me it had some kind of a problem or issue. Maybe I'm a glutton for punishment, or I just like mysteries, but I told the customer to send it over and I'd take a look. I think it's important to mention here, if you haven't already realized this, that I'm not really trying to do tutorial videos on this channel. As I've mentioned before, I'm more interested in the processes we use in troubleshooting and fixing. There are a lot of different ways to tackle a problem, and only one aspect of that process is having all the information, or in knowing the steps necessary to fix something. I might add that I think that applies to life in general on a variety of levels. So in this video I'm going to try and demonstrate and describe the process I followed in figuring out what the equipment was, understanding how it was supposed to work, and determining whether it actually did work correctly. As for the fix, well, you'll get the answer to that during the video. So stay tuned. Today we're working on a piece of sound gear called a Mackie DL32R. So like we all do these days, I googled that model number, and this is what came up. I realized right away that this was a Mackie board, and I've used Mackie boards in the past, but not one of these digital ones, and that it was a wireless digital mixer, that took me to the website very quickly. And I learned a whole lot more, including I was able to get the owner's manual. And looking through the owner's manual, I found the front panel and how that was designated, as well as the back panel, and a lot of other good information. So this mixer doesn't have an actual typical interface with faders and controls. It actually is controlled using a tablet. But the customer said it's just not working. I haven't powered it up or tried anything with it yet. The mixer came to me in a Roadcase, and there's actually a couple of other things in that case. At the top we have what's called a Gemini PL9 power supply and light source. So it's basically a power bar. It's got these pull-out lights, and you can control the lights with a dimmer, and it just basically gives you light on the front panel of the mixer itself. Now, the mixer is set up with 24 standard XLR female jacks for the first 24 channels, and then it's got another 8 channels using these hybrid connectors. I forget the name of them right now, but I'll get that. And these are there so that you can use multiple different inputs. You can plug an XLR plug into it, you can plug in a 1/4 inch TRS plug, and there may be some other options as well. These are all inputs over here, and then it has 16 outputs, which are XLR male plugs, and then we've got an AES port, a couple of monitor jacks with 1/4 inch TRS. There's a phone's volume control and a phone's jack. And so that's all there is on that. And then in the rack also there's a nice little drawer that can hold various things. Now this unit, as I understand it, is connected into your Wi-Fi, and so on the back panel there is a RJ45 connector for plugging into your Wi-Fi network, and it comes with some cables and so on to do that. Okay, so let's just pause for a moment and see where we are in this process I was talking about earlier. So far we've opened up the equipment, we've observed what we have. We've used the model number to search for and to find information about the manufacturer, what the equipment is, and generally what it does. We've identified and located most of the main parts of the equipment. We basically know what this piece of equipment is. So where do we go from here? I'd suggest that in most cases at this point, if we haven't noticed anything already, we should do a basic visual inspection for obvious damage, whether it's physical, electrical, heat, etc. We've already been looking at it, so it's likely we might have seen something already, but it's also easy to overlook clues that might be significant. So we have to ask ourselves, is anything broken, anything crushed, scraped, charred, scorched, etc.? Do you detect any suspicious smells like scorched or burnt or whatever? Does anything look worn or dirty? And then if you find anything along those lines, obviously you have to investigate that further. But if not, and we didn't really, we need to proceed. So what's next? Well, obviously I guess we want to power the unit up and we want to see what happens. We're going to review whatever information we have so far. We know that the customer said it doesn't work. He just said it didn't work, which isn't much to go on. And who knows whether that's even correct anyway. I've had situations where they just didn't know how to run the equipment or whatever. So the next thing is we'll power it up. We'll observe whether everything looks good, and we're going to proceed from there. And of course, as we proceed further into that, we're going to need to come up with some tests that will tell us whether it's actually working correctly. And that's exactly what I did. So let's move forward. Okay, so I'm starting with the very basics. I just plugged in the actual mixer unit to AC. I'm not going to use the light panel with its power supply for now. And I'm just going to turn on the power at the back just to make sure that we actually have power. Well, and we've lit up the power LED, and so that's a good first start. And it's actually turned green after a few seconds, and there's a network light and that's flashing. So I'm going to try and connect up my network to it and just see if that satisfies that particular LED. Okay, I plugged it into my network and my switch indicates that it is connecting, but this light is still flashing. So I'm going to have to delve farther into this and just see what it's expecting and what it needs in order to work. So having browsed through the DL32R owner's manual earlier, I realized that there was a power and network LED values table that gave information on these LEDs. And it said basically that the power LED would be red until power came on, then it would turn green, and that the network LED would flash green until the tablet was connected to it. Okay, to test this out, what I've done, just because I don't have quite the right patch cords handy at this moment, I've kludged together something to do a basic test. What I've done is I've taken my signal generator over here and I've brought a signal out from that and plugged it into one of these, into input 30, just because it'll accept a 1/4 inch plug. So that's going into, the signal's going into channel 30, and what I've done is I've taken out a signal out on number 14 here. Now number 14 I think I said before that this had 16 outputs, but it's actually only got 14. And number 14 is labeled as right and number 13 is left. That's somewhat common, is the last two outputs will often be assigned as the main left and right output on a mixer like this. I know I have worked on a lot of Behringer X32 stuff, and that's the case. They'll use 15 and 16 on their outputs, and these are all typically configurable. So that signal coming out of there, I've just kind of got it running through a jumper that goes into my little test amp over here, and the idea is to inject a signal and see if we can get anything out. So here is the app, the version 4 of the app on my old iPad, and this is channel 30 right here. And when I turn on my signal generator, you'll see that I do have signal on there, and if I adjust my signal level on the signal generator, I can control how much is going into that channel. If I turn it up here, so there's the channel fader there is up, and here's my main output fader, and I am actually getting the signal. And if at some point when you drive it too hard, the input to this little lamp goes into some clipping, but that's not a problem. It's just that I'm setting a little too much signal. So based on that limited test, this seems to be working. We've got an input and it's going in, it's being seen. We've got an output, it's coming out, and it's going to my amp and it's being heard. The app is working, it's controlling the channel, and it's controlling the main output. So I guess we need to look further to see what else might be happening here. I probably need to contact the owner and get a little more information. Now, I believe this is new to him, so I'm not sure how much information he has, but I will try and get to the bottom of that and get back to you. Okay, so I've tried this on a couple of different inputs, and I've tried it on both of the left and right outputs, and everything seems to actually be working quite well. In the background here you can see my scope, and the input signal is on the bottom and the output signal is on the top. As we lower the channel gain, the output goes down. And so we've got an input, we've got an output. The signal levels may not be quite right yet, but they certainly are working. So after establishing that the basic functions of this mixer were working, what else should we do? Well, there's a lot of functions on a mixer like this. It has 32 input channels. We need to check to make sure that all 32 input channels are operating and they're operating correctly. We need to check the output channels, make sure they're all working correctly. And then there's a lot of other functionality, things like routing of the signals in different places, and effects like reverb and compression. So it could take a very long time to check every single aspect of this board, and I haven't done that completely, but I have checked all the input channels, I have checked all the output channels. I checked to make sure the reverb was working, and I checked some of the routing functions, and I have not been able to come across any actual problem. At one point I thought one of the input channels was the gain was too low, but after tweaking it and just being very careful to measure the input and output levels and comparing it to another channel, setting the gains identically and the faders, the result was that they were working the same way. They just had been set up beforehand differently, and the gain on this one channel was had been set quite a bit lower. And so I've spent a fair amount of time, and I have not found a single thing wrong with this. Now, it doesn't guarantee that there couldn't be some small thing, but it's not showing up for me. And I've been extremely thorough on that. So I think we're at the point now where we have to say that this thing is functional, and the fact that there was some there was a lack of clarity in terms of what exactly was wrong with it and what we needed to check out. It also adds to the fact that it probably is not useful to try and test every single function of the unit. So I think we're going to wrap this up at this point, and we'll get it back to the customer, and we'll see what happens from here. I might also add that this particular unit apparently is for sale, and so if there's anybody out there that is looking for a 32 channel mixer that is controlled by a free app, please feel free to send me a message in the comments, and we'll make some contact and we'll see what we can do. So thanks for joining us on this slightly different video, and I hope that all our talking and discussion about processes and ways to approach problems has been somewhat useful to you. And if so, please feel free to give me a comment. I also encourage you all to like and subscribe, and you can also ring that bell so that you'll be notified of future videos, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one, and have a good day.